The first sip of tea may seem ordinary today. It sits quietly on kitchen tables, in office mugs, and in elegant porcelain cups around the world. Yet behind every cup lies a story stretching back thousands of years. A story of emperors and monks, merchants and pirates, smugglers and soldiers. Tea has sparked wars, built fortunes, inspired revolutions, and connected civilizations across continents. Few everyday drinks have shaped human history as profoundly. Our story begins in ancient China, where legend says that around 2737 BC, Emperor Shen Nong was resting beneath a wild tree while his servants boiled water. As the wind stirred the branches above, a few leaves drifted into the steaming pot. Curious, the emperor tasted the fragrant infusion. The drink was refreshing, calming, and unlike anything he had experienced before. Whether this story is fact or legend, it reflects something important. China became the birthplace of tea, and for centuries the world beyond its borders knew almost nothing about it. In those early centuries, tea was not the familiar beverage we know today. Wild tea plants grew in the misty mountains of southwestern China, especially in what is now Yunnan province. Local communities chewed fresh tea leaves, used them as medicine, or boiled them into simple broths. Over time, people discovered that carefully harvesting, drying, and preparing the leaves produced a smoother, more enjoyable drink. What began as a medicinal herb slowly evolved into a cultural tradition. Tea's greatest transformation came during the Tang dynasty, beginning in the 7th century. China was experiencing a golden age of prosperity, innovation, and artistic achievement. Bustling cities were filled with merchants, poets, scholars, and travelers. Tea became more than a drink. It became a symbol of refinement and learning. Tea houses appeared across the empire, offering places where people could discuss philosophy, conduct business, write poetry, and exchange ideas. One man helped elevate tea into an art form. His name was Lu Yu, a scholar who dedicated years to studying every aspect of tea cultivation, preparation, and appreciation. Around the year 760, he completed a remarkable work known as the Classic of Tea, the world's first book devoted entirely to the beverage. Rather than simply explaining how to prepare tea, Lu Yu explored the ideal water, the finest growing regions, the proper utensils, and even the peaceful mindset needed to enjoy each cup. His work transformed tea from an everyday drink into a cornerstone of Chinese culture. As tea spread throughout China, vast plantations expanded across mountain slopes covered in mist. Farmers carefully picked the youngest leaves by hand, often during the cool mornings of spring. Processing methods became increasingly sophisticated. Some leaves were steamed, others pan-fired, while different techniques created entirely new varieties with unique aromas and flavors. What seemed like a simple plant was becoming one of humanity's most valuable agricultural products. Meanwhile, Buddhist monks played an equally important role in tea's history. Long hours of meditation demanded concentration, and tea's gentle stimulating effects helped monks remain awake during extended periods of prayer. Monasteries cultivated tea gardens, perfected brewing techniques, and carried tea culture wherever they traveled. As Buddhism spread across East Asia, tea traveled alongside it, quietly crossing mountains, rivers, and borders. By the time the Song dynasty arrived, tea had become deeply woven into Chinese society. Elaborate tea competitions rewarded the finest growers. Skilled artisans crafted beautiful ceramic bowls designed specifically for preparing tea. Wealthy families collected rare teas, much like works of art, while ordinary citizens gathered daily in neighborhood tea houses. Tea was no longer reserved for emperors. It had become part of everyday life for millions. Yet despite its growing importance within China, tea remained one of history's best-kept secrets. Foreign merchants passing through Chinese ports caught glimpses of this remarkable beverage, but strict controls limited what outsiders could learn. The empire guarded its tea-growing knowledge carefully, understanding that its unique climate, skilled farmers, and centuries of experience had created something the rest of the world desperately wanted but could not yet produce. That secrecy would not last forever. Beyond China's borders, ambitious traders, expanding empires, and powerful trading companies were searching for valuable goods that could transform global commerce. Silk, porcelain, and spices had already reshaped international trade. Soon, tea would become the next great obsession, and its journey from China's mountain gardens to the rest of the world would change history forever. The first Europeans to truly encounter tea arrived not as curious travelers, but as ambitious merchants. During the 16th century, Portuguese ships began reaching Chinese ports, carrying silver in exchange for exotic goods, unlike anything found in Europe. Silk shimmered with unmatched beauty, porcelain seemed impossibly delicate, and among these treasures was a fragrant drink that Chinese families had enjoyed for centuries. At first, tea was little more than a curiosity. Small quantities found their way into the homes of wealthy nobles and royal courts, where it was admired as an expensive luxury rather than an everyday beverage. Its delicate taste surprised Europeans who were accustomed to beer, wine, and strong herbal infusions. Some believed it possessed extraordinary medicinal powers, claiming it could cure headaches, improve digestion, and even extend life. The Dutch East India Company quickly recognized tea's commercial potential. By the early 17th century, Dutch merchants had established powerful trading networks stretching from Asia to Europe. Their enormous sailing ships returned loaded with precious cargo, and tea gradually became one of the most profitable products crossing the oceans. Every successful voyage increased demand, encouraging merchants to risk dangerous storms, pirates, and months at sea for another shipment. As tea spread across Europe, each nation embraced it differently. France admired it as a fashionable drink among the aristocracy. In Russia, caravans carried compressed bricks of tea thousands of miles across Siberia, creating one of history's longest overland trade routes. But nowhere would tea become more deeply woven into national identity than in Britain. When Catherine of Braganza, a Portuguese princess and devoted tea drinker, married King Charles II of England in 1662, she brought her love of tea to the English court. Her daily habit quickly became fashionable among nobles eager to imitate royal customs. What had once been an unfamiliar foreign drink suddenly became a symbol of sophistication and status. The British East India Company secured exclusive rights to import tea into England, turning the beverage into one of the empire's most valuable commodities. Massive warehouses filled with carefully packed chests of Chinese tea lined London's docks. Auctions attracted merchants from across Europe, each hoping to profit from the growing obsession. Yet tea remained astonishingly expensive. Heavy taxes imposed by the British government pushed prices beyond the reach of ordinary families. For many people, a single pound of tea represented weeks of wages. That enormous price difference created an irresistible opportunity for another kind of business. Along the rugged coastlines of southern England, entire communities became involved in the illegal tea trade. Under the cover of darkness, fast-sailing vessels slipped quietly ashore, carrying untaxed tea hidden beneath ordinary cargo. Armed gangs transported the precious leaves inland through secret routes, bribing officials and intimidating anyone who stood in their way. Some smugglers became local heroes, while others built criminal empires worth fortunes. The government fought back with harsher penalties, increased patrols, and violent confrontations along the coast. But demand continued to grow faster than authorities could control. Tea had become more than a luxury. It had become a daily habit people were unwilling to abandon. Meanwhile, another problem was emerging for Britain. China wanted very few European goods in return for its tea. Instead, Chinese merchants demanded payment in silver, causing enormous amounts of precious metal to leave Britain every year. The balance of trade increasingly favored China, worrying British politicians and powerful trading companies alike. The British East India Company searched desperately for a solution. If Britain could not convince China to buy British products, perhaps it could find something else the Chinese market would accept. That search would eventually lead to one of the darkest chapters in tea's history. In British-controlled India, vast fields of opium poppies were cultivated under company supervision. The opium was illegally smuggled into China despite strict bans imposed by the Qing government. As addiction spread among millions of Chinese citizens, silver began flowing out of China and back into British hands. The profits from opium financed even greater purchases of Chinese tea, creating a deeply unequal and destructive trade system. Chinese officials watched with growing alarm as addiction devastated communities and weakened the empire. Determined to stop the crisis, Commissioner Lin Zexu ordered thousands of chests of confiscated opium destroyed in the port city of Canton in 1839. His decision was intended to defend China's people, but it also threatened Britain's enormous commercial interests. Britain dispatched modern warships to China's shores, beginning the First Opium War. Steam-powered naval vessels armed with advanced artillery overwhelmed Chinese defenses, exposing the enormous technological gap between the two nations. The conflict was never truly about tea alone, yet tea stood at the center of the global trade system that had helped ignite the war. When the fighting ended, China was forced to sign unequal treaties that opened additional ports to foreign trade and ceded Hong Kong to Britain. The balance of power in East Asia had changed dramatically, and tea had become inseparable from the story of imperial expansion, global commerce, and international conflict. The world now depended on tea more than ever, but Britain still faced one critical weakness. Nearly every leaf still came from China. That dependence would inspire one of the boldest acts of industrial espionage in history. Britain knew that controlling the tea trade required more than powerful ships or profitable companies. As long as China remained the world's only major producer, Britain would always depend on Chinese growers. The solution seemed almost impossible: obtain the tea plants themselves, along with the closely guarded knowledge of how to cultivate and process them. In 1848, the British East India Company turned to a Scottish botanist and explorer named Robert Fortune. Officially, he was traveling to study Chinese agriculture. Unofficially, he was on a mission to gather one of the greatest commercial secrets of the 19th century. Disguised in traditional Chinese clothing and often traveling under assumed identities, Fortune ventured into regions that were normally closed to foreigners. He visited remote mountain tea gardens, observed skilled farmers at work, and carefully documented every stage of tea production, from selecting the youngest leaves to steaming, rolling, drying, and sorting them. More importantly, he collected thousands of living tea plants and seeds. Transporting those plants halfway around the world was a challenge in itself. Fortunately, a recent invention known as the Wardian case, a sealed glass container that functioned like a miniature greenhouse, protected delicate plants during long ocean voyages. Thanks to this innovation, thousands of tea plants survived the months-long journey from China to British-controlled India. The British had already experimented with tea cultivation in India, particularly in the northeastern region of Assam, where native tea varieties had been discovered growing in the wild. Now, armed with Chinese plants and Fortune's detailed knowledge, they combined local and imported varieties, refined cultivation methods, and established vast commercial plantations. Across the rolling hills of Assam and later the cool highlands of Ceylon, modern-day Sri Lanka, entire landscapes were transformed into endless rows of tea bushes. Forests were cleared, roads were built, and processing factories appeared deep within the countryside. Thousands of laborers, many working under harsh colonial conditions, picked tea leaves by hand from sunrise until evening. Every basket of fresh leaves represented another step toward Britain's dream of controlling the global tea supply. The gamble paid off. Within a few decades, India and Ceylon were producing enormous quantities of tea. Britain no longer depended entirely on China, and the British Empire became the world's dominant supplier. Tea prices gradually fell, allowing ordinary families to enjoy a drink that had once been reserved for emperors and aristocrats. As tea became more affordable, it settled into daily routines across Britain. The custom of afternoon tea, popularized during the 19th century by Anna, the Duchess of Bedford, became a social tradition. Families gathered around teapots each afternoon, sharing conversation over sandwiches, cakes, and warm cups of freshly brewed tea. What had once crossed oceans as an exotic luxury had become an essential part of everyday life. Tea's influence extended far beyond Britain. In India, although the crop had been developed largely for export, tea gradually became woven into local culture as well. Spiced chai, blending black tea with milk, sugar, ginger, cardamom, cinnamon, and other spices, evolved into one of the country's most recognizable drinks. Today, roadside tea stalls serve millions of cups every day, turning a colonial crop into a cherished national tradition. Elsewhere, tea developed unique identities. Japan refined the centuries-old tea ceremony into a carefully choreographed expression of harmony, respect, purity, and tranquility. Morocco blended green tea with fresh mint and generous amounts of sugar. Russia continued its tradition of brewing tea in samovars, while Turkey embraced strong black tea served in elegant tulip-shaped glasses. Every culture adapted tea to its own tastes, proving the remarkable versatility of a single plant. Today, tea is second only to water as one of the world's most consumed beverages. Billions of cups are prepared every single day. It supports the livelihoods of millions of farmers across China, India, Kenya, Sri Lanka, Vietnam, and many other countries. Modern tea production relies on advanced farming techniques and global logistics, yet much of the harvesting process is still performed by hand, just as it was centuries ago. It is remarkable to think that a few leaves drifting into a pot of boiling water, whether legend or reality, could begin a chain of events that reshaped global history. Tea influenced exploration, financed powerful trading companies, fueled smuggling networks, contributed to international conflicts, inspired industrial espionage, and transformed economies across continents. It connected distant civilizations long before the modern world became interconnected. The next time steam rises from a simple cup of tea, it carries far more than aroma and warmth. It carries the legacy of ancient Chinese mountain gardens, Buddhist monasteries, merchant caravans, imperial courts, crowded London docks, colonial plantations, and generations of people whose lives were forever changed by one extraordinary plant. Few everyday objects tell such a vast story. Hidden within every cup is the history of exploration, ambition, culture, conflict, and human connection, a reminder that even the simplest things can shape the course of civilization.